Hello, this is Victoria Rivera speaking, and I'm going to go over chapters 5 through 8 of the novel. Chapter 5 is titled Geishas, Gooks, Gangsters, and Geeks, and this chapter was one of my favorites because it broke down and truly described the emergence of Asian stereotypes in the media. Before I talk more about that, I first want to share this great quote from the novel. It goes, "Truth was that Mom and Dad rarely spoke to us in Chinese. Worried that we might develop an accent, my father insisted that we speak English at home to lessen the hardships and make us more acceptable as Americans." This quote was found on page 110 of the book. And after reading this quote, I myself had a different viewpoint on language assimilation. I think it is very interesting that many Asian American parents, like Zia's, spend a great deal of time and effort to make sure that their children speak English at home. They do this so that their children will face less discrimination and be more acceptable as Americans. However, what we have to remember is that speaking flawless English does not free you as an Asian American from discrimination, and it certainly does not separate you from the stereotypes that may later define you in society. The struggle to truly assimilate as Asian Americans in society in terms of language reminded me of the article we read in class. This article was What is Literacy by G. According to G, on page 7 of his article, in order to master literacy skills, children need to be exposed to settings which focus on acquisition, not so much learning. So, in terms of Zia's life and upbringing with her parents, she was exposed to settings which focus on acquisition in her home, but other than her home on the outside and other than school, she really had no opportunities for acquisition as other American children may have had, because in society people degraded her by her speech. I think when this degradation happens, one gets discouraged about their skills, but Zia persevered as many other Asian Americans. Additionally, in this chapter, we see the rise of Asian stereotypes in the media. For instance, in Zia's eyes, the Asians produced for mass consumption filled her with shame because they defined her face for the rest of the world. This quote was also found on page 110. We know how awful stereotypes are and how they generalize. It saddens me that Asian Americans were stereotyped and generalized not only in society but also in the media. In class, we discussed and learned a lot about stereotypes surrounding African Americans, and we see how both cultures face negativity in the media relating to their race. For instance, in the article, Mapping the Margins, Intersectionality, Identity Politics, and Violence Against Women of Color by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, the example about the color purple explains how Celie kind of embodied her stereotype of a black woman suppressed by not only society but also her violent husband, but yet she rises above and out of her stereotype as she speaks up against Mr., allows her love to be full and given to Shug, and becomes successful as a business owner. Celie is the example that shows us that stereotypes, so they define us, they don't always have to be what we are. In the beginning, she was her stereotype, but at the end, she broke free from it. Similarly, there are connections between Asian Americans and African Americans in the portrayal of certain characters in the media. For instance, how is Miss Saigon and the use of yellowface different from blackface? Both cultures experienced degradation in the media when white people tried to portray them. Fortunately, because of protests and battles, groups like APACE have made it mandatory to hire a person based on race. Like in Miss Saigon, there will be Asians hired, not white people pretending to be Asian. When we think about this, what kind of message does it send? We are making fun of that culture and stereotyping them even more when we allow yellowface and blackface to happen. I found the next quote fascinating as it describes stereotypes explicitly. Geishas, gooks, and geeks have been the staples of main characters of mass culture's Asian universe. The subservient, passive female, the untrustworthy, evil male, and the ineffectual, emasculated nerd. This was found on page 119. I think that when we think about these stereotypes, we can see as a society how we generalize many races in the media. not only African Americans and not only Asian Americans, but many different races are generalized in the media as being a couple of specific things. Something I thought that was interesting was to show the difference between the new pop culture movie Crazy Rich Asians and the preview for Miss Saigon. If you click to my next slide, I included both videos, which are short previews of each. What I found fascinating was the difference in the time between them and how the roles are switched this time. In Crazy Rich Asians, the main female character is criticized for not being Asian before American, whereas in Miss Saigon, the main female is looked down upon because she's Asian before American. It also fascinated me how negative Asian stereotypes do not really appear in Crazy Rich Asians as they do in Miss Saigon. Is the media making a turn in their portrayal of Asian characters over time, or do we still see these stereotypes in the media? So if you go on to my next slide, you can view the two videos. Thank you for listening to Chapter 5.